Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Today I have a guest and I've been so looking forward to talking to her. My guest today is Brook Urick, and Brook wrote a book called Wink, Wink, Nudge, Nudge. And I actually first found out about this book from other podcasts that Brook was on. So I reached out to her. She said, yes, I'll come on. And I'm so honored and happy to have you here. So before we get into the meat of what this book is about, tell us a little bit about you and tell us why you wrote the book.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to get your perspective from a therapist and all of this. So, I'm Brooke. I am an author, a whistleblower, and I worked behind the scenes of a popular sugar daddy website for 5 years while also trying my own luck as a sugar baby. And I made a lot of mistakes along the way and had my own coming of age while I was working there and really learned about the nefarious mechanics and the shady, slimy practices of that website and just of like media in general. And then I've had another reckoning since the book because I have been trying to get this story out there. And I was in contact with some very big news conglomerates like ABC 2020 and the New York Times back in 2021, and they never ran my story. So it so it definitely changed my tune about how I feel about getting this story out there and really made me realize the paramount importance of my voice. And I'm really glad to get to your audience as well, because I think this is really important information to get in people's hands.
Yeah, I mean, today we're hearing a lot more about sex trafficking and what was interesting to me. So you all are going to have to get the book and read it. And I don't want to give too much away, but we are going to, of course, talk about the book. But at the very end, you did talk about a little bit of how politics are involved in all of this. You know, you kind of alluded to it at the end. And I thought it was there, no pun intended, but this industry is more in bed with media and possibly politics than I think that we realize, and maybe more than we want to know.
And I didn't think that when I first set out to write the book. I had a very different book in mind originally when I was
Mhm.
chatting with those big news conglomerates. And as I realized more and more about what is truly going on, and I just started feeling like a conspiracy theorist because
Yeah,
I'm like, it goes all the way to the top. And then it really does.
it
And then
kind of really does. Yeah.
yeah, of course, all of the Diddy allegations, the Matt Gates stuff,
Yep.
like it really all ties into what I'm trying to inform people of. And I feel like some people are like, oh, well, I already knew that. And I'm like, yeah, but the kids don't know that. Like the young
No.
kids, they don't know. So it's really them who I want to reach with this information, and maybe their parents or people who know them. Because, yeah, I think a lot of people have already made their bad decisions. But,
Mhm.
some people don't know. Some people really don't know. And they really believe that, the media is just out there doing good work and just wants to inform the public of what's going on. And I believed that too for a very long time. Like I was a normie watching ABC just like everyone else like 5 years ago. And then my own personal experiences led me to believe otherwise. So that's kind of where I'm at now.
I think most people don't know what is going on. I really think the average American, they're busy, they're working, they're raising children, they're taking care of their elderly parents. I mean, they've got stuff going on in their everyday lives in their towns and in their communities. And I think they don't know. And that's why I think it's so important that we are talking about this so that podcasts are more and more popular as the months and the years go by and people are tuning in and they're listening. And this is where we're getting a lot of information today. So good on you that you have courage, you're brave, and you're talking openly about what you went through in this industry.
Thank you. Yeah, and
Yeah.
what I'm learning is that I mean, I already knew this, but I share this experience with so many people, and I actually had it pretty good compared to
Did
what
you?
happens to a lot of people. Yeah, and I knew that while I was working there, and I kind of chose to brush it off because I was young, but also I kind of had the wind at my back with all of these people who were working there telling me I was doing good work, and then the media who was reaching out to me, wanting to talk to me. So it was sort of like this constant feed of positive reinforcement for doing something very bad. And I came to that realization at the end of my time there while I was working there. But then it became even more real to me afterwards as I got older and those girls started to look younger and younger. And I was just like, I can't live with myself if I don't do something about it. Like, it's worse to not do something about it.
And Brooke, you were 25, 26 years old when you had this realization. You were still young, right? When you were like, I can't do this. Like, I think I'm out.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it was very difficult for me during, like, my last year working there because, I was 26 and
Yeah.
I was making a lot of money there and I set myself up for an expensive life, and
Yeah.
so I couldn't exactly just quit the job. We were doing things like traveling and I was kind of, like, just doing my own thing, so I didn't really, it didn't sink in until later because I was just moving so quickly, and then as I watched myself back on some of those interviews where I'm peddling this false narrative, I was like, I can't let people think that that's true. I have to tell people that it's not true. So I
Wow.
mean that's what I sought out to do in the book is to take accountability for what I did by like literally taking account and like putting it out into the
You
public.
did. You blew the roof off of this job you're in, this career. You really did.
And there are so many people that are reaching out to me and they're like, "Wow, like I thought I was just dumb. Like I thought I just like couldn't
Yeah.
figure it out. Like I thought I was, getting scammed because I'm just naive." And I was like, "No, it's because they set you up." Like it's one thing if people set themselves up for disappointment, right? Like if you go out and you meet someone and they're a liar or whatever, I mean, I guess you kind of set yourself up. But the problem is that they didn't set themselves up. The website set them up.
They were
And
manipulated.
yes, the marketing of the website and the just general notion that there is such thing as like a sugar daddy, like a man that just wants to give you money for simply existing. It's like, no, no, no. Like it's sex work.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
and that's very confusing for people because most people believe that sex work is not legal. And so they're like,
Right.
well, if this website exists, then it must be legal and it must not be sex work because the website exists. So it's like this very interesting paradox that especially gets to the young girls because they don't know. Like they have in their minds that, the media exposes things and then the government shuts things down that are illegal. But that's not true. Like that's not what happens. And I'm of the belief that this website stays around because people like it the way it is. The men in
Ah.
power like it the way it is. Because, of course, it's not the young, naive girls who truly, honestly don't know what they're doing. It's the 40, 50, 60, 70-year-old men who certainly do know what they're doing. They're the ones who like the website sticking around.
Well, it's kinda like online version of I think of Hugh Hefner and the Playboy Mansion and all the parties, and then with the exposé that came out about, all the Playboy, that was on during I watched it during COVID. There were a couple of them, and
Mhm.
they had those former bunnies, the ones who would talk, and what was done to them. I mean, it is not all is not as it seems, and your story reminded me a little bit of what those women went through. A lot of smoke and mirrors, a lot of manipulation. Come on in. And then you get in there, you realize, oh, and then the doors are shut behind you and you look around and you go, this is okay. This is not what I thought. It's not just those Sunday parties that you get invited to, the hot women, that I remember watching Real Housewives, probably the first year of Orange County. And one of the housewives was taking pictures of herself in a bikini on the beach. This is probably 2013 or 14 because she wanted to get an invite to the party they had every week or something. And that's what we thought it was. It was just fun, like pool parties. No, no, no. It's a lot more than that.
I think so many people have different experiences. Like some people might just go for an hour and they think, oh, like nothing's
Right.
going on. But
Like the Diddy parties.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
I I don't think that every single person that went to a Diddy
Right.
party is
Right.
culpable,
Exactly.
but if you go to a party like that as a young girl and you at first don't think anything horrible is going on and you are willing to go in the back room and then they give you a drink and then they offer you drugs and you're willing to do that. You're like, "Okay, like, might as well." And then they do things to you that you're not so willing to do, but you've already found yourself in a predicament. It's
Sure.
like, well, I'm not going to run out of here. I mean, in the Diddy case, there might have been baby oil on the floor. So it's like you literally
Right.
can't run out. And I think they disassociate And the people who disassociate and are complacent with the abuse are the ones who are invited back to another party. So it's again, it's that positive reinforcement for nefarious acts. And the ones who it's the same thing in like sugar relationships or these like sex work relationships is the girls who are willing to suffer the abuse are the ones who take home the bag. If the ones who go on the private jets are the ones who don't hold men accountable and let their sexual deviance fly. And it's just like I think we're seeing it again with the age of celebrity as well. It's like it seems that like a lot of these people that were elevated to these statuses were complacent. And I'm not like blaming them in any way because of course
Right.
like they're so young when it happens
Right.
that you're taught certain things by these adults and you think that well this is what these celebrities are doing, this is what everyone's doing, so it must be okay. And then
Right.
oftentimes you turn around and you do the same thing when you're older because you were taught that it's okay. So it's like this perpetual cycle of abuse that I think am seeking to break.
Right, and so it's the quid pro quo of it's a transaction of you do for me and I'll do for you. You have sex with me in whichever, way, shape, form that I want it, and you're gonna literally get the bag or the Louboutins, or you're gonna get the private jet, or you'll get a trip to London, and that's the exchange, right?
Yeah, and I think a lot of times the exchange is unspoken, which I
Mhm.
detail a little bit in my book. It's like I never I negotiated one time and then I was like, "Oh, that's yucky." But most of the time I feel like it's not negotiated. So therefore neither party feels like they're engaging in sex work and it puts them in
Mm.
an interesting position legally because if no one thinks they're engaging in sex work then like are they? But
Okay.
usually it ends up being like I said, the girls who are more complacent, they're like, okay, well, I'll do this. And then she receives $2,000. And she didn't ask for the $2,000. There was no agreement for that, but that satisfies her. She's fine with that. So she does it again. And it's
Gosh.
like because it's so unspoken and I mean as a woman when you're having sex you either have to be, into it or you have to dissociate. Like that's
Right.
the two things that our body tells us to do. And when you're able to dissociate from the sex that way, you are more willing to do it again. And you don't realize until later in life how much it damages you. It's kind of like childhood trauma, right?
Yeah,
It's
it's
like you,
trauma. Well, that's the
you
word
well,
that's coming up, trauma.
for sure, it's trauma, but you don't.
Dissociation is a form of trauma,
Oh,
the
totally.
way we
But
deal, yeah.
I think a lot of people like I didn't really think that I had a bad childhood or that like it messed me up. And I didn't have like a bad childhood. Like I had a great childhood by all means, but it still messed me up a little bit, you
So
know?
let's get into it. Yeah, let's get into let's yeah, I wanted to ask you so the listener could understand how tell me a little bit about your childhood and how did you get into this work? Let's go back to the beginning and take us through. We don't have all the time, but let's go through as best as we can and tell the reader and the listener, the reader of your book. But the listener, what got you here?
I was very promiscuous when I was young, and my dad really wasn't emotionally present. Like, I mean, he was around a bit, but he wasn't really like there for me, or we wouldn't have like a close relationship. And, I have a close relationship with him now. So it really took me a long time to kind of unpack the idea that, like, because I didn't have a close emotional relationship with him, I sought out the attention from other men. Like, it's daddy issues, right? And
Right.
like, a lot of people don't think they have them but when you really like go back and think about it, you're like, oh yeah, like I guess I was looking for that. And my mom was of the mind that, kids will be kids. They will do what they're going to do. So at least she can be safe. So I
Sure.
was put on birth control when I was 13. When I was like even thinking about having sex, I was put on the pill. And it made me unstable. It made me crazy. I remember I got the Depo-Provera shot and for 3 months I was just like on the verge of tears the whole time.
Yeah.
And the answer from the doctor and from my mom was like, "Oh, well, we better try something else." Like it wasn't that like, "Oh, well, maybe like birth control isn't for you and maybe like you shouldn't be promiscuous and maybe like you shouldn't be having sex." Like that
Right.
was never the answer.
Right.
And I mean, I'm not saying that they were right or wrong and I mean good on my mom for like trying to have like a close relationship with me and not wanting to lord over me. but she was also very permissive and just like let me do whatever. And it led me to, and she was always like very open about talking about sex and like wanted me to be open about that. And it led me to my first job while I was in college. Well, I worked other jobs, but my first job in the sex industry, which was working at an adult novelty wholesaler. So
Oh,
it was
yeah, I
just,
remember this.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was there in the very beginning. It was a niche manufacturer of a male chastity device, which is, I mean, they're
You're
actually
gonna
like,
have to explain that because I had no
yeah,
idea until you
I
explained it what it
realized that I had no
was.
idea either. But it's so funny. They're actually like growing popularity again. I've heard from like some of my gay friends. They're called cages. So
Mm,
basically, it's like chastity is like not having sex, right? It's like being
right.
prevented from having sex. Usually it's for like religious reasons, but this is like a device. It's like a toy, but it like is a cock cage. So it like goes around your penis if you have a penis, and it prevents your penis from like getting erect, and it prevents you from having sex because it's like
Mhm.
locked on there. I'll let you guys look at the logistics of that if you want to look it
Sure,
up.
sure.
But I was working for this company. It was like basically a warehouse where we like shipped out these products, and like they were manufactured in Taiwan or whatever, and then we would ship them out. And I didn't realize at the time, but like I was 18, 19, and I was becoming so desensitized to talking about sex and the sex industry in general. And that behavior and ability to like talk about sex so nonchalantly was actually what impressed the PR manager at Seeking that then got me my job. So she was like, "Wow, you're really good at talking about sex. You know, you should work for us." I was like 21 at the time. And that's kind of an interesting thing is when someone who's 21 has just like such a well-rounded and like interesting view of sex. And like I was, talking to people who were wearing the devices on the phone because they would call and they would have questions. So I just got very desensitized to that. And I think that led me to, then be desensitized as well to this job.
What was your first foray into seeking arrangements? How did you even know about them? How did you become involved with them?
Well, I live in Las Vegas and I turned 21 and was going to the nightclubs, the day clubs, being like knowing hosts who would like place you at different tables. Cause basically, like the rich guys on vacation, like from their wives, usually,
Mhm.
like only want to spend lots of money if there's like pretty girls around. So you would get like paraded around and like sort of like commodified and like placed at
Okay.
these tables. And then go out to dinner with them. And it was not a big deal to me to be like hanging around with older men and for them to be like spending money on me. So my friend told me about the website and she was like, "Oh, well, I like have a sugar daddy or I'm meeting these guys." And I'm just like, "There's these guys that just like give you money?" And she's like, well, kinda." And I was like, "Okay." Like it wasn't so far off from what we were already doing. So but then she told me they were doing a reality show casting. And I was like, "Oh shoot, like
Right,
I don't want to get a job after college. Like I want to be a reality star."
right.
So I signed up for the website. I emailed them about the casting and they called me like 20 minutes later. And they were like, "Hey, like you're perfect for this opportunity, like this and that." I was like, "All right." So I did the quote reality show. It was not a reality show at all. It was basically just like an interview with like, I think it was like the Travel Channel or like some one off show. And I didn't have any experience on the site, but they didn't care because like I had the aesthetic they were looking for.
Mm,
So when it came to the actual interview, it was probably so terrible. I had never aired because like I didn't have anything to say. Like I didn't, they were telling me what to say. And before I even went on the air, I was made to sign a contract that said I wouldn't say I was ever paid for sex. I wouldn't disparage the company. I wouldn't tell the producer that I was being paid for the interview
mm,
because that's like an ethical violation for journalists and producers and reporters. Like you can't have a case study or like an interviewee that's paid
okay.
because like I actually went to school for journalism. So I knew all of this,
Yeah.
but then I was like, "Oh, well, I guess the real world is different than I thought." And then I actually ended up getting the job after that interview. They cast me in another photo shoot. It was like a clean photo shoot. And that's where I ended up meeting the PR manager. And later on, I got hired as a casting director. So I was
Hmm.
then the one who was doing the casting. And
Bringing
basically,
the new girls in.
well, not for like to be a member of the website. It
Okay,
wasn't
to be
like
a sugar
everyone
baby.
Yeah, and everyone
Okay.
joins of their own volition.
Okay.
It wasn't like
Okay.
I was, like, going out recruiting, like,
Okay.
girls to join the website.
Right.
I was a PR liaison. So, I was the intermediary between the news organizations like CNN or whoever that were
I see.
covering this topic,
Okay.
and the members of the website who would appear as case studies or interviewees for the news organization.
Okay.
So, in order, just like I was cast and then used as a media pawn, and then I was doing that. I was casting people for these interviews.
Okay.
So basically, that looks like we would pitch the story to whoever. Like, well, CNN did a really big piece. This is Life with Lisa Ling back in 2015. And so they say, okay, like we're interested. We want to follow a sugar baby. Can you find us one? So then we, as PR casting directors, we would go on the website and email everyone and say, hey, does anyone want to participate in this like paid media appearance? And then we would coach them
Mm.
and tell them basically to lie on camera, say they haven't been paid for sex, say they don't have any sex,
When they
say,
were being paid.
of course, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Most of the, I mean, like 95% of them had been paid for sex,
Yeah.
but we made them sign contracts and basically scare them with legal threats saying that they wouldn't say they were paid for sex, that they wouldn't say they were paid for the interview, that they would basically lie on our behalf. And then if they
Wow.
didn't want to do that at any point, we would like use scare tactics to scare them
And
into to doing that.
what's the average age, Brooke?
When I was working there, I think it was about 22 or 23. Because,
Yeah.
there are some like more mature women. I mean, really, you can be any age and like join the site as a sugar baby. There's no like age limit, except for we
Sure.
told the people that you had to be 18. But at the
Okay.
time, there weren't a lot of precautions in place because it was, quote, a dating site. So just like
Sure.
any other dating site, you would just join and just tell the site what your age
Right.
is. I mean, which is
Right.
kind of the precautions they have on a lot of these sites where you're supposed to be 21 or you're supposed to be
Yeah.
18.
They just say, make sure,
So
put your date of birth in. Do you say you're yes, and you're right into it.
yeah,
Right.
exactly. So I mean,
Yeah.
there are a lot of young girls that on there, 18-year-olds. When I was working there, there were underage people on the site who were lying about their age, and it's those are the ones who are targeted in terms of like
Uh-huh.
advertising. Is they really target. Or when I was working there, they targeted college students or just like young people in general because that's what most of the men on the website like is they like young girls.
So you were working in PR, but then you threw your kind of name in the hat as a sugar baby looking for a sugar daddy, right?
Well, I actually before I started working for the company, I tried that
Okay.
because I was about to graduate college, and I was like, well, like, wouldn't it be cool if I just like found a sugar daddy and then I just like did that for a while because I hadn't really traveled a lot. I didn't have like a lot of life experience, so I was interested in that. And I quickly learned that it's not what it seems. I was not going to find a rich boyfriend. I was going to find a lot of men who are either using the website as an agency to trick women into sex with false
Mhm.
promises. Or as I worked for the company longer, there were also a lot of like financial fraudsters because when a young person is naive and they think that someone is just going to send them money for simply existing, it opens them up to a lot of financial fraud, like
I
bank
see.
fraud,
Yep.
like the Nigerian prince scam, check
Yes.
fraud, like all kinds
Yes.
of stuff like this. So, so that I learned that later on, and I tried to date a man off of the website who was twice my age, and he wanted the fantasy. He wanted me to be enamored with him and be grateful and accepting of whatever it was he wanted to give me. And the second I held him accountable or acted entitled to the money that I thought I was, working for,
Right.
he ghosted me. He dropped me. And I had already quit my job at the novelty place and I didn't apply for my next semester of courses. So I was kind of in a bind.
Yeah.
And I remembered that the PR manager at Seeking offered me a job. So I was like, well, I don't really have a lot of options right now. Like maybe I'll just take this job. And I did. And ended up working there and they just kept giving me more and more money. And at the end of my first year working there, I was 23 years old. They gave me a $20,000 bonus. And so it was more money than I'd ever seen in my life. Like I didn't come
Right.
from money. So it's I mean, when I'm looking back now, I realize that the same tactics that kept me at the company, giving me more and more money for putting my head down and being complacent and complicit, those are the same tactics they use on the girls on the website that are being paid for sex.
Brooke, was there anybody in your life, your mom, your dad, anybody, an aunt, anybody that you were talking to about this? Anybody, an outside observer who could speak with you about what you were doing at that time in your life? You know, you dropped out of school. Did anybody know that you were on SA, that you were involved? Like, that's what I'm wondering. Because sometimes it helps to hear an outside voice saying, "Hey, hey, wait a minute. What's going on? What are you doing? Why are you doing this? Why are you leaving school? Let's think this through together." Is there any of that?
Well, no one knew that I had dropped out because I only had 1 semester left, and at UNLV, they let you apply for graduation, like, for walking on the stage before you're actually done with your credits.
Right.
So I just applied for graduation and just walked, and, like, everyone thought
Oh,
that I graduated. So, I mean, I still don't have a
yeah.
degree to this day. But no, I mean, I didn't really tell many people. I think that's part of it is there's, like, a secrecy
The
culture.
secrecy. Yes.
Yeah, and, like, there's a
Yeah.
stigma around it, I mean, for good reason, and so, I mean, I did tell my mom what I was doing, but
'Cause
again,
she
she
seemed
was
pretty open, you know?
yeah, I mean, she was just like she was I mean, she still is, of the mind that, like, she doesn't wanna tell me what to do. Like, at that
Yeah.
time, I was 21, like, I was an adult, so it's like, you have to let her make her own decisions and make her own mistakes, and if she tried to lord over me and be overbearing, that would only drive a wedge between us because I was gonna do
Yeah.
what I was gonna do.
Did
So,
would you have felt that way, do you think, looking back? Is she accurate? Like, yeah, I would have been annoyed with her and not open to what she would have to say to me, if she was to say anything.
certainly, and if
Yeah.
that was the case, that I knew that she wouldn't be open to it, I just wouldn't have told her.
You wouldn't have told her. Yeah.
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
think she wanted
Yep.
me to be open with her
Yeah.
and wanted to know what was going on, and
Right.
therefore she can't really say anything. I think a lot of parents are kind of find themselves in that
Yeah.
position, which is kind of why I want parents to get their hands on this book and hand the book to their young daughter or son or
Yeah.
whatever who's thinking about
Yeah.
getting into this lifestyle or just thinking about monetizing their sexuality on the internet in general. It's like, don't take it from your parents, take it from me. Like,
Yeah.
I'll tell
Right.
you how it really is. And
Right.
then after reading my book, if you still want to go do that, then go do that. But at least you have the knowledge and understanding of what really goes on and the best it can possibly be.
It's important to me that the supplements I take are of the highest quality. And that's why for 5 years, I've been drinking AG1. Unlike many supplement brands, AG1 conducts relentless testing to set the standard for purity and potency. I know I can trust what's in every scoop of AG1 because it's tested for 950 contaminants and banned substances, while the industry standard typically only tests for 10. Taking care of my health shouldn't be complicated, and AG1 simplifies this by covering my nutritional basis and setting myself up for success in just 60 seconds. AG1's ingredients are heavily researched for efficacy and quality, and I love that every scoop also includes prebiotics, probiotics, and digestive enzymes for gut support. So if you want to replace your multivitamin and more, start with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1 year supply of vitamin D3 plus K2 and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first subscription at drinkag1.com/Anna. That's drinkag1.com/Anna. Check it out. You will not regret it.
You know, one thing throughout the book that kept coming up for me as I was listening to you was the lack of systems that were set in place with this company, that lack of like almost like procedures about how potential the beginning a sugar baby is paid for her time and her work. That didn't seem to be. It was, and I felt for you because it was like you were so young and you didn't, now you can tell me if this is accurate or not, but I felt that you almost didn't have a voice or you lost your voice and somebody is going to take you to Florida and you were awestruck by their amazing sports car and, maybe the restaurant that you went to, and the one guy who took you to a Holiday Inn, but he was staying at the Ritz. I just felt so mad for you.
Yeah, right.
And I thought, no matter what our thoughts or opinions are about this, you ought not to be treated like that. I mean, you and I think maybe some of these sugar babies are not treated with the respect that they deserve for what they're doing. And how is it that a man can say, "Oh, $2,000, I got 500, and I'll PayPal you the next week." Well, you're not going to see that money. I mean, you don't see the 1,500, maybe you saw another 500. That was what I didn't understand, was seeking arrangements didn't have that firmly in place. I don't know. I mean, get your credit card, get the guy's credit card information. They can bill them. I don't know, to make sure that the girls get paid. And it is that, am I thinking that accurately?
Yes and no, because the website purposely absolves themselves of any sort of legal ramifications and purposely
Okay.
obfuscates justice by
Sure.
telling everyone it's not that. Oh no, it's not sex
Oh,
work. Oh no, it's not that. So if they were to anyway get involved in any transactions, that would be them, facilitating sex work. And
I see. I
and
didn't
it
think of it. Yes.
and
Okay.
it just
Okay.
makes much more sense for the
Yeah.
company to just say, "No, no, no, it's not that." And, "Oh, no, those members are violating our terms. They're really not supposed to do that." And the
Slap
rea
on the wrist. Don't do that again.
that's the wink, wink, nudge, nudge
Yeah,
is
but they do it again. Ah,
they have all these winks and nudges to people on the website that tells them, "Oh, no, no, no. Don't do your transactions on the website. Don't discuss sex for money on the website because that's against our terms." In no way are they saying, "Don't have sex for money." They're saying, "Don't do it on the website,"
ah.
because the website is the agency. That's where you meet the people. And then it's your responsibility to negotiate and do your transactions yourself. But that leaves the naive young people
Right.
in a very terrible position because they're not pros. Not only do they not see themselves as sex workers and they don't think they're getting paid for sex, but also they're not pros. So they don't
Yeah.
have the knowledge that professional sex workers have, which is, you get a deposit beforehand, you get the money up front, whatever it is. They don't have any of that. And I mean, the thing with men who want to pay for sex or really want to spoil girls or whatever, like when there wasn't a website around that facilitated that transaction, those men would have to prove themselves in one way or another. They would have to either, take you on the nice dinner or give you the money or show you the fancy
Right.
car or whatever it was. But the website sets these men up and tees up the ball for them.
Yeah.
So they don't actually have to have any money or any status or even be good people at all because the website's entirely anonymous. So they don't have to have their identity associated with their crimes, essentially. And there is no way to figure out who did that to you because if a girl has a criminal encounter or whatever, and she goes to the website and she says, "Hey, like this guy R worded me, this guy this or that," the website doesn't do anything about it because that's not their legal position. They don't do anything about
I
it.
see. So there's
And
no protection. There's
there's
no
absolutely no
protection
protections in place.
at all.
But the young girls are also so distraught after things like that happen to them because victims blame themselves. They think, "Oh, well, I'm
Yes.
just stupid." Like, "Oh, well, I just made a
Of course.
mistake."
Yep.
And they don't tell anyone usually what happened to them. Like when it happened to me, I didn't tell anyone what happened to me until now, 10 years later. But I think
So
that's
you
what
kept that
happened.
inside all this time.
Oh, yeah, and I doubled down because I was working for the website, so I was like, "Oh, no one would ever think that happened to me," because here I am, like, working for the website. So in my own, like, way, it was my way of, like, rewriting my story, saying, like, "Oh,
Oh,
well, I'm not someone who would ever get victimized, like, I'm too smart for that." But, like, in reality, I'd been victimized, like, several times.
I
So
saw that. Yeah, you did talk about that in the book. Yeah, and you were on the doctors, you were on some, daytime television shows, and you were really a promoter of seeking arrangement of this organization.
yeah.
Yeah, and at the same time, I could see in the book you said the word dissociation quite a bit. And I thought it was interesting. It was like, and I was thinking to myself, oh, this is how she coped. How she coped with all of these moments was she just kind of did like an out of body experience, whether it be something that happened to you with a guy, something that happened to another girl who was in another sugar baby, something. She was distraught. She was upset. You knew that she was treated poorly. You knew that air quote should not have happened. And you would just go somewhere else inside yourself. I noticed that you would vape, you were smoking, vaping cannabis, weed. You would get high or you would drink or you would just be like, la, 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 just pretend it didn't happen. I noticed that. I don't know. Were you aware of it when you were talking about that, that that's how you cope for all those years and those incidences?
I
Did it
had
feel like coping?
Yes, and I had
Okay.
I was very into, like, yes, smoking weed and, like, doing drugs and drinking at the time, and now I don't do any of that, like, I don't
Really?
you know, because
Wow.
I don't need to dissociate anymore, but at the time, I had my rationale, and actually, while I was working for the company, I knew that, this website was technically legal. Like, there wasn't you know what I mean? Like, the website would be around whether or not I was working there. And so it was my thought that I like had this, it was called Let's Talk Sugar. It was like a sugar baby guide, which has been completely scrubbed from the internet. Like, it no longer exists anymore.
Mm.
But it was like this blog site, YouTube videos, and podcasts, like about how to stay safe, about how to be a sugar baby, about, I mean, it was all our PR nonsense, but it was also a lot of like good information about like how to avoid like scammers and fraudsters and like, because it actually wasn't that bad when I first started working there. But as the popularity of the website grew exponentially, so did the bad actors that
Oh,
joined the
yeah.
website.
Yeah, you give
So
some examples in there. Scary stuff.
Oh, it's
Gosh,
terrifying. I mean, and don't take my word for
terrifying.
it. Like, Google it. Like,
Yeah.
there's so many instances in the news of like this happening. But then while I was working there in 2018, there actually was new litigation that was passed. It was called FOSTA SESTA, and it's the Freedom of Human Sex Trafficking Act. And I mean, it has its merits, but it also kind of like did a lot of harm to sex workers because
Oh,
the website in effect, or the litigation in effect shut down the website Backpage. I don't know
oh,
if you've ever
okay.
heard of Backpage,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah, back in the day, it was like it got shut down right in 2017, 2018. But it was like a classifieds place for sex workers, and it was
Right.
a lot more like cut and dry. It was like $300 per hour, like all of this. And that website was shut down after this legislation was passed. So it's basically says the new law says that websites that facilitate, assist, or support sex work or sex trafficking are no longer covered by Section 230, which is like the law that kind of governs the internet, which basically
Okay.
says that websites are not held legally responsible for the content that third-party users post. And
Okay.
that little like 26 word legislation that was enacted in 1996, like long before anyone knew what the internet would become, that basically absolves all websites of responsibility for anything that their users do. So,
Oh,
I mean, good and bad, right? There's
yeah.
a good side to it because, of course, like you don't want to be held responsible for some crazy person in your comments, but
Right.
also dating websites are not held responsible for criminal activity between their members because they're treated as a
Oh my
distributor,
gosh. Yeah.
yeah,
I
rather than a
mean,
publisher.
it's slippery. This is how people get through because this is such a slippery thing.
Yes,
I
and
mean, I can't help but think about the minors today, the sex trafficking that's going on in this country. I'm thinking about all of the immigrants that have come through, the children. You know, we see this footage, and I'm wondering, and they don't know where they are. They don't know where they are, and I can't help but think of what we're talking about and those minors that are here. Not that they're all in it, but they think a lot of them have been sent into this sex trafficking trade.
100%. And I mean,
Yeah.
I think that of course does happen and like it's very terrible. And my heart goes out to them. But more often, it is a more nuanced situation that is sex trafficking. So I believe, and I've seen through anecdotal evidence and in the media, that this website is used by sex traffickers to find their marks. And sex trafficking can look a lot of different ways, right? But basically, what it is one person procuring a sex worker and then taking them somewhere to be paid for sex. So
Okay.
sometimes the victims are willing participants because they are getting paid for the sex. They are in agreement that they are getting paid for the sex.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
it doesn't make it any less of a felony. Like it's still a federal crime to do that. So I think what happens in a lot of cases is the victims know they're traffickers. They are either they're roped into it, they're convinced into it, and then they are pawned off and paid for sex. So yes, of course, like young children are sold, and like it's horrifying. And sex trafficking in America is more often, someone going on seeking arrangement and procuring a bunch of girls and inviting them to a party and seeing who is willing to be paid for sex and who's willing to take drugs. And and that's what happens all the time. And if, they are willing participants, like I guess it makes it a little bit less bad, but it's when they get themselves in the situations that maybe they want to leave, but they can't,
Yeah.
or maybe they don't want to be paid for the sex anymore, but then they're in this position where they don't really have a choice.
Why
Um,
can't they leave, Brooke?
I mean, I've just heard all kinds of anecdotal evidence of like, the traffickers threaten them, threaten their families, or they just straight up say, you can't leave. Like, no, you
Yeah.
can't leave. Like, where are you going to go? They've
Yeah.
been brought to, a remote mansion in Florida or whatever it is. It's like, where are they going to go? Like, if you're already there, that's consent enough for them.
I
And
think I'm thinking about Ghislaine Maxwell. I'm thinking about Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, I can't
well,
help.
the thing is, like Jeffrey Epstein and Diddy and Abercrombie CEO, they all used the guise of celebrity and of this, enterprise that they had to then lure the girls in. And that was needed that during that time. And a lot of these allegations are from, 20 years ago. But now you don't need the guise of celebrity or enterprise because you have seeking arrangement where you can
Uh,
easily go on and find these naive, young, sometimes underage people to convince them into lives of sex work. And it's terrifying. It's very scary. And it's absolutely shocking that the website still exists.
So it still exists. It's still okay. What Tell me what happened to you? Why did you get out? You don't have anything to do with it anymore. You're a whistleblower now, talking about everything that went on here. What happened to you? You had some sort of a turning point in your life.
Yeah, and it was really when the legislation was passed while I was working there and realizing that it is a lot more nefarious and a lot more terrible than I had imagined. And during my last year there, I got moved up in the company. So I began seeing all of the different departments and all the different pieces. Like previously, before then, I had just worked in PR. So, I mean, I knew the PR side was slimy and I knew some things, but I
Right.
didn't have the full picture because they silo the departments very carefully so that nobody really understands what's
Oh,
going on.
okay.
And once I began to understand the full picture, I began to speak out about what I thought was injustice or the fact that I didn't think they were doing enough to protect the members. And I was kind of just no longer sipping the Kool Aid anymore. But Alexis and I were kind of doing our own thing. We were like doing traveling PR and stuff like that. So I was just kind of staying away from the office, like staying out of it and doing what I believed I could to like help the sugar babies. Right.
Right.
And
Right.
of course, like that was very misguided and I like regret all of that. But as I began to be more open and speak out more and go to HR actually about like what I was thinking, I got pushed out of
I
the
bet.
like,
I
yeah.
bet.
So, and then they ended up laying off like 12 people and offering me a severance. And I thought it was the beginning of the end. Like I was already looking for other jobs and I thought the website was going to get shut down because there was this legislation that had been passed like 6 months prior. And I was like, oh, well, sayonara, like you guys are going down. And
Right.
so then when the Matt Gates scandal broke, the years later, right? So
Right.
I just tried to forget about disassociate, right? I became
Sure.
very good at disassociating. And so I just kind of tried to wash my hands of that company, got a different job, like tried to forget about it. And then when the Matt Gates scandal broke in 2021, which I mean, if you guys don't know about that, it's like the,
Yeah, you wanna tell the
former
listener?
yeah, former sitting congressman who, I mean, the ethics report just came out about him
Yeah.
paying for sex from a minor or multiple minors. I'm really not sure what happened there, but the website that his associate procured the minors on was Seeking Arrangement.
Wow.
So the
Wow.
man who procured them, the sex trafficker, essentially is his name's Joel Greenberg, and he's currently serving an 11-year sentence for underage sex trafficking and tax evasion.
And wasn't he
So
just nominated? He just backed down 2 weeks ago?
so there's two people in the story. So the one who's in prison right now is Joel Greenberg,
Okay.
and that's the one who was procuring the girls.
Okay.
That's the one who was the sex trafficker. And then
Okay.
Matt Gates, his friend, allegedly was the one who was paying them for the sex.
Okay.
So he's still around. He
Yeah,
yes,
I
he
mean,
got
he's been in the
nominated
news.
he got
Yeah.
nominated for attorney general, then he stepped down and like I don't think he's going to be a congressman anymore. I really don't really know what his deal is. But
Okay.
back in 2021, that's like recent news that we're just
Yeah.
talking about right now. But back in 2021, that's when the scandal actually broke. And they were like kind of trying to hide it, keep it under wraps until literally like a month ago when they finally like released the ethics investigation. The scandal broke in 2021 and that's when I was reached out to by the New York Times and ABC 2020 who did this whole story on me. I sat with each of them respectively probably for like 7 hours each, like
Wow.
doing interviews and just like telling them everything I knew. And there's like a lot of nefarious stuff. Like we're only scratching the surface with
I
like
know.
a lot of the
Yeah.
stuff that happened. But I was under the impression, I was like, oh, the New York Times, like they're
Right.
really going to blow the lid off of it. Like they're going to do something about this. So I was of the mind that, the story's coming. Like there's going to be a breaking point. And especially after the whole Matt Gates thing, I was like, oh my gosh, like using taxpayer dollars to pay underage girls for sex. Like, oh my gosh, like the
Yep.
website where they're finding these girls, that has to be of in public interest. Like, isn't that going to be of public concern? And when it became clear that those stories weren't coming out, I was like, okay, like something fishy is going on. I still don't know
So
why the
what
stories
happened?
didn't come out.
So you're these interviews, they never came out?
Never. And those journalists don't talk to me anymore. And in their reporting now, they report on Matt Gates, but they don't mention this website anymore. So I don't know. I
Wow.
still don't know because they don't talk to me.
Huh.
So I mean, they know I exist. They know I'm out here. I know they're out here. So
Yeah.
I have no idea. I would like to know. I would really like to know. And that's why I've been like trying to pitch this because there are a lot of documents and there's a lot of digging that needs to be done by like a true investigative journalist that needs to. And I mean, I'm working with like a couple right now, but it's like it's just hard to get all of these like documents and get all of the proof and evidence in order to publish a story in that way.
Yeah.
So
I
I
can
was
imagine it's a lot of work. I can only imagine.
it
Yeah.
was it's shocking that the New York Times did all of that work and then they never published it.
Yeah, I wonder
So
what that's about, huh?
I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know if it's a catch and kill situation. I don't know if it's that they have someone at the top who like doesn't want this story coming out. I really like have no idea. And so the only thing that I can really do is tell people what I know. I'm working with a nonprofit called the National Center on Sexual Exploitation
Mhm.
who actually has like a really interesting web page where they talk specifically about seeking arrangement and outlines exactly how they are obfuscating justice and exactly what they're doing and why it's criminal. And they have like a prefab form that's like, tell your senator to investigate or tell the DOJ to investigate seeking, like one of those prefab forms, like write
Right.
your senator kind of
Right,
thing.
right.
So I encourage people to go on there and
Okay.
try and encourage people. I'm trying to encourage the DOJ to investigate this. But actually, the new attorney general is formally a lobbyist for like anti-sex trafficking. So, like, I have a feeling that like hopefully like something will go down soon.
In the
Um,
next few years. Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
but until then, it's really just like me over here saying like, don't do that. That's bad. That's a website should be
Right.
shut down.
Well, you keep doing what you're doing. I mean,
Thank you.
you're speaking out. You have a voice. You have a strong voice. You keep doing this and keep showing up on podcasts. And I've got a lot of listeners. The more you do this, the more people are going to get to know the story and get to know you. You're really making us more aware and educating us about this nefarious underworld because I really most people don't know about this. I want to ask you though. I want to get to a little bit I want to know, I'm so curious, where do you know where any of these girls are today that you knew when you were the other sugar babies? What was the mental I keep thinking about the mental health and the psychology of what makes somebody want to become a sugar baby. I don't the men, that's a whole other ball of wax. I'm not as interested. I think that I know there's issues there as well, but what makes a young woman want to become a sugar baby? And I would I just would think it would erode their almost a spirit after a
Absolutely.
while, right?
Oh, it doesn't take long to erode your spirit at all. It happens very quickly. And I think most of them are in need of money. A lot of
Yeah,
times they're destitute, they don't have a lot of options, and they turn to this because they think it's a way out. Especially in this economy, like I feel like people just like don't have enough money to meet their basic needs.
right.
And so the prospect of a rich guy just filling your bag, I think that resonates with a lot of people, and especially how normalized monetizing sexuality has become with like
Yeah.
OF and all of those models, how the porn industry is just like so much more accessible now. I think people have their perspectives distorted on what it does to you, because there is so much, quote, easy money out there to be made. But the truth is, it's not easy money. It's horrifying money. And it's money that will haunt you for the rest of your life. And
Wow.
it's so hard to explain to a young person who like is in financial need that like chasing money is not the way to go. Like having lots of money will not make you full, it will make you empty.
Yeah.
And that's a very hard thing to understand. So, I mean, that's why I wrote the book, is because I want people to see themselves in me and see that, you might feel this way at one point, but if you go through this, if you go through with it, you will feel much differently coming out the other end. And you will regret the decisions that you made, just like I regret the decisions I made. So I'm hoping to mitigate some of that by sharing my story. And I know a lot of people who, like me, were like 20, 21 when they got on the website. Now they're my age, 33, 34, and they're looking back and thinking, "Oh, wow, like I was bamboozled." Like they just feel
Really?
much differently about it. And I mean, you're seeing that a lot with the models and the porn stars that are coming out saying like, I,
Right.
I feel much differently now, basically. Like I was abused, it was bad. So, I mean, that's
You
what I want
lose
to
your
do.
self-respect, I would think, your worthiness. You know, even if you don't, I think you must play a head game with yourself. You tell yourself something to make it be okay. You push aside that still small voice, which is our conscience deep inside of us. It may be a dim light, a dim voice, but it's there at some level. And you talked about that in the book. But it's like, ugh, just no, just you need to go over there. I'm going to put you in the corner for now because I need to be doing this, right? And we all have a conscience. We're all raised with a moral conscience. The age of reason, they say, is 7. So, at 7 years old, we do know the difference between air quote right and wrong. And I don't mean to moralize or be judgmental right now, but I do think at our core, we know when we're being disrespected. We know when someone is not treating us in the worthiness, even if we're all from dysfunctional families, I believe. But even if you're from like a really poor background, you didn't have great parenting, even with all of that, we still know when someone's not treating us right. And I think at some level we'll say, okay, I'll take the money though, because I need it. Well, we put our conscience aside. Am I tracking?
Absolutely. Oh, for sure. And it's so much easier to do that when you're young because you don't
Yeah.
have as much life experience and you think, well, I kind of know it's wrong, but that's just the way it is. Like you convince
Yeah.
yourself that, like, oh, well, I can't control, out there what happens. Like this is just how life is in the real world. And then when you get older, you realize, well, okay, it is like that, but it shouldn't be. Like
Yeah.
that should not be the case. That should not be true. But when you're so young, you don't have a consequence mindset. So you don't think of
No.
the consequences of your actions. It's just it doesn't come to your mind
No.
until much later. And it's really hard to explain, how stupid you were when you were young until, you're older and you're looking back and you're like, wow, I was really stupid. So I don't know. I completely agree though. It's yeah.
So, Brooke, so where are you? So you got out of it. How many years ago is it now? The 2018?
Yeah, so it's been like what, 8 years?
8 years.
Yeah.
So what have you been doing in the past 8 years? Tell me about you today. I know you wrote this book.
Yeah.
What's going on in your life?
I worked sales jobs for a long time and now I do some like marketing consulting on the side. But I mean mostly I really want to pursue this book and
Mhm.
everything that comes with it. So I have like some projects in the works that kind of like are related to this book. And yeah, I mean I just feel very passionate about this
Good.
and like I'm not actually like making any money off of it just yet. Like I aspire to like make money off of it, hopefully.
Hopefully
Um,
you will. You will. Yeah.
but more so, I feel called to give this information to people and to share what I know because it made me look at the world and base my actions off of that outlook so much differently than I did in the beginning. And I just like I was of the belief when I was young, justice will prevail and like, oh, the media is out there just doing right. Government is out there. They're just trying to do the right thing. And now I just don't feel that way as
No.
much. And it's because of my own personal experiences. So it's a lot of that. Like I want to like wake some people up, or I think a lot of people have suspicions of media manipulation or of whatever it is. And maybe they haven't heard like specific stories from the source. And it's my goal to share those stories with them from the source and let them know like
Okay.
this is really what happens. Like I know that you thought maybe it's what happens, but I'm telling you this is really what's going down. And just helping them to seek out independent media, to look for their own biases
Right.
and understand like confirmation bias of like what you're being told
Yep.
online
Yep.
and hopefully just like dispel some of that like paradox of the internet where like what people tell you online like becomes more real than like what the real world really is. Like the reality of the website is obviously very like nefarious and like people being paid for sex, but the outward appearance of it is like, oh no, it's not that. So it becomes like, because the public perception is different, it becomes not that. And
Yeah.
so, but
Yeah.
that's what it. So it's just, I don't know. This is the things that I think about. Is like, how do you meet in the middle of this world where like we're so chronically online and where technology just like consumes us and controls us? How do you try and separate yourself and make it to where the real world, what's really really happening, actually becomes more real again than the online world?
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's what I want to do.
It's yeah, the very loaded, and we could talk for hours about
Right.
that. You're asking and you're bringing up big thoughts and questions, and I think we need to continue to be having dialogue and conversation that like we are right now about this. And I think much of it goes to parenting. So much of it goes to spending less time on social media and on the internet. And it's a problem. We all know it's a problem. We're all addicted. There have been studies that have shown how these business schools and these tech companies and higher education programs are trying to addict us for the dopamine hits. I mean, it's a thing and it's science backed and it's proven. We all at some level are addicted, but the younger ones, I think you got to start with the kids and you got to start with parents. And you said that in the beginning of this about like parents, you need to give this book to your kids because they need to understand. I mean, it's pornography. There's a dark, dark underworld out there that I think a lot of people don't realize. I hear a little bit of it in my practice from time to time. Pornography is just that's a big, big problem with males in North America and really around the world. And no one's talking about it, but it is a problem. They are having struggles in life, in everyday life, struggles with jobs, struggles with relationships, struggling with anxiety and depression. So much of it is about this secret addiction that they have. So it's all like along the same line of what you're
Yep.
talking about,
It's
right?
all
Yeah.
connected. I mean, it
Yep.
goes back
Yep.
to easily being sexually gratified.
There you go.
And
There you
I
go.
think that all of this is all in line with that. And it wasn't always so easy. And I think it
No.
was better in a way when we had to work for it a little harder and we had to woo people because that's just not the case now. And it's led us to this wild place where we're in with dating. Whereas like the women feel like they're being disrespected and no one wants to settle down. And the men are like, well, I can easily get sexually gratified by paying a few dollars or watching
Sure.
a porno.
Sure.
So I
Yeah.
think that has led to a rotting of the culture. So that's, yeah, it's a huge issue.
We need to end, but I wanted to say to you that when I was listening to you in the book, you mentioned a couple of times about taking your birth control pill. And I had this thought that I know on my own to be true, but I didn't think you were going to mention it. You did, and you just talked, oh, I could take my little pill, whatever, my gotta take my pill. And that was it. And at the very end of the book, you talked about birth control and how much it messes with our hormones. But you did talk about it earlier today in this podcast, but how it messes with hormones. And I had read about a study, and I have since had people I actually brought it up to my gynae, and she just completely poo-pooed me. Actually, sort of like kind of laughed at me. Like, that's not
Wow.
true about how the birth control pill, the hormones can really mess with our bodies. And I have had countless females over the years in my practice who have been affected by this, but they also say that it does affect who you're attracted to. So when people, yeah, so when people
Mhm.
come off the birth control pills and they're not on any of those hormones, the men that they're attracted to, if they're heterosexual, is very different, which I thought was fascinating, fascinating. And you talked about it. So I applaud you. Thank you for bringing that up because we don't talk about that ever at all. I never really talk to people about it, except for my clients who have had this experience, who are going through a divorce or like, oh, I'm not attracted to him, trying to get pregnant. I'm off the pill for the first time in 10 years. Now I'm like, oh God, like, it's anecdotally, I have the evidence in my practice and you mentioned it. So I wanted to thank you for that.
Well, a lot of YouTubers are talking about it. There's like Dr. Sarah, who
Okay.
is going on some podcasts right now doing the rounds. She just wrote a book, but I actually just made a YouTube video about that too, because I
Yeah.
had so many experiences with birth control where there were signals that it was changing who I was as a person. And I think for everyone it's different, right? Because everyone's
Right.
body is different.
Right.
But for me, especially being on it so young, I think it really kind of warped my perception of men and of the relationships that I desired. And having a few experiences with it later on, I just realized that it completely makes me a different person. And I,
Wow.
I
Yeah.
can't I can't use it because a hormonal birth control just it the hormones don't sit well with me. And I would advise people to, reconsider if they are taking the pill and they're feeling some of these things that we're mentioning, like, maybe go off the pill and like see how you feel.
Hit
I
the
mean, obviously
reset
I'm not a
button.
doctor.
Right.
I'm not a
Right. We're
doctor. I
not
don't need
doctors.
medical
Hit the
advice.
reset button.
Yeah.
Right.
But yes,
But do your
yes.
homework.
Hit the
Yeah.
reset button. That's a really good way to put it.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Brooke. So where can people find you if they want to know more about you and they just want to get into all things Brooke in this book? Where can they find you? Where can they find the book?
You can find me on all the socials on my YouTube. It's at Brook Urick. And my book is out on Audible right now, or you can buy it on like Amazon or Barnes and Noble or wherever you buy books. You can find it on my website too. It's brookurick.com.
Urick.
Yes,
Yes.
BROOKURICK.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank
Thank
you
you
so
for
much,
this
Anne.
conversation. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Keep doing it.
Thank you.
All right.